See, I think gamblers can see this idea of running out of your stake by running into too many losers. And I think that's more obvious to gamblers than it is to traders, because I think traders overestimate.
Two traders, Darren and Walter, pull back the curtain on profitable trading systems, consistent money management, and profitable psychological triggers. Welcome to the Two Traders podcast.
Welcome back. It's Walter here, and this is part 2 of Darren and my conversation about gambling and trading. We're going to talk about how some cultures look at trading in a completely different way, how Darren's completely changed his view on gambling and how it relates to trading. We'll talk about a professional gambler and how he views the crowd, what the sucker's bet is, and how this relates to trading with retail traders at large. And also you'll see some of the interesting parallels that Darren draws between gambling and trading. This is interesting because the perception of gambling has changed over the years, and recently in particular. And so we're going to see how this actually feeds into how you may view trading and how you may view your odds. All of this and more in this episode 108, part 2 in the Two Traders podcast.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, I mean, I think that when you go, like, it's interesting, isn't it? Like when you in Australia, when you go to the horse races, they make a big day out of it, and everyone gets dressed up and whatever, but that's only a couple times a year, really, where they do that. And in the financial markets, you got to put on a suit, and you got to drive a nice car, and you got to go to a big tall building in the middle of the city, right? Because that's a really important thing that you're doing. But in the end, it's just because the banks don't bet on horses, you know what I mean? So it's seen as a more, and you can probably take lots of courses on, how to figure out if a stock is worth money. And if you go to college, you can probably take a lot of business courses on, of evaluating stocks and companies and all that, and reading balance sheets and all that. But you're probably not going to find very many courses on game theory and gambling theory. That's not going to be one of those things that comes up a lot. So it's probably just more perception than anything. The perception is that because the banks are making money at this, and let's be honest, the odds are stacked in their favor, really. It's easy for them to make money. It's only when they get a little bit greedy that they get into trouble. I don't think people realize that banks are really part of the engine that makes money appear out of thin air. When you go and put your money in the bank, that gives the bank license to print 90% more money than you gave them and go out and loan that out. You know what I mean? In some cases, 98% more money. So you deposit $100,000. That means the bank can go out and now they can give out $900,000 in loans because they've got your $100,000 sitting in the bank. People don't realize, the banks are part of that. So yeah, so I think it's just more of a prestige. It looks more prestigious. It seems more, like you say, I mean, I know you like this idea of control, and it feels like you have more control if you get to pick when you buy the currency or which stock you buy or whatever. You feel like you have control if you can go back and look at the data and see, well, this would have happened if I would have done that, and that sort of thing. I suppose you can do the same thing if you're looking at, sports gambling, but it just feels like there's more legitimacy when you can go and get a college degree on, in essentially investing or accounting, but you can't really go get a college degree in horse racing.
I think, I sometimes think people think they're playing a different game to what they are in trading. I think they make assumptions about trading being a specific game when really it isn't that game,
Yeah, I mean, the most common one that I run across is people, they say, how do you keep track of all the information? In other words, they assume that to be a trader, you have to use a lot of fundamental analysis. You have to be on top of all that. I don't believe that to be true, but that's the default sort of thing. That, everyone thinks that in order to trade the markets, you have to know the markets. You have to, read all the news and understand all that. Well, if you go back, like if you were to go back and back test the headlines, go back and see, just have a quick look and see if you just look at the front cover of The Economist and see if that would make you money. I think you'd be surprised at how often doing the opposite will make you money.
Yeah. I know this is the interesting one for me. I mean, is it right at the moment? I'm kind of obsessed with fairly low win rate systems because I've kind of got this bee in my bonnet that really that is almost the most important part, and that's slightly misleading. But when I say a low win rate system, I mean that in general you're holding your trades for much longer. So a lot less of them are going to work out, but the ones that do tend to be really big winners. And I'm kind of going down this route that I'm trying to remove all of the elements that I don't believe they can make a difference, but the amount of difference they make is very subtle, and it's not really going to help you in the long run unless you get kind of really lucky. So I'm just kind of trying to boil it down. What is just the one or two things that really matter. And I wonder whether the same kind of rings true for betting, because you should go, and I suppose the fundamentals of horse racing would be you'd look at the track, you'd look at the weather, you'd look at the horse's past performance, you'd look at the jockey and the trainer, and then you'd make your bet. But obviously then you've got to look at the odds and your risk to reward of the scenario, how much you'll bet in as well. But can you do away with all of the fundamentals and just say, well, the odds on this are 4-1, he's still got a chance of winning if I just bet on 4-1s? Is that the most important element? Can you do away with it, or do you still need a bit of the other as well? But which bits are the most important? What's the fluff?
Yeah. One thing that strikes me when I listen to the sports gambling podcast is the professional gambler. He talks a lot about like trends and things like that. So he'll say things like, when the winner of the Super Bowl plays their first game of the year the next year, typically what they do is the team that wins the Super Bowl gets to play the first game of the year, right? The following year. And so, he talks about how often they win the game, and so he's playing a lot of odds, and he'll talk about other things like, I don't know, whenever, a team has to fly across country or something like that. So a West Coast team has to fly to the East Coast, and how, that decreases their odds and things like that. So what he's constantly doing, to me, what I've noticed and the little that I understand, is that he's looking at two things. He's looking at what he's believed to be his edge, which is basically his trading system. So those are the stats that he relies on. But more importantly, he watches the crowd, and he waits for the crowd to really, it's almost like he's picking his entry into a trade. Like he knows what trade he wants to take, and then he goes down to the lower time frame to kind of like, zoom in and cherry pick his entry. And that's when the crowd is he knows the crowd has completely pushed it too far. That's when he'll go in and he'll snap up and he'll place his bets.
Because he gets better odds at that point, does he? Because the odds have shifted.
Yeah, the odds have shifted so much. Yeah. So it's a really fascinating listen. I mean, to hear this guy talk about it, how, like, for example, here's one that he mentioned. He said that typically, like, they have odds in Las Vegas if you follow American football. I know I keep talking about American football. I know a lot of listeners don't even follow it, and I apologize, but it doesn't matter, the sport. What they know is that a lot of fans will overestimate, and they're over-optimistic. It's the optimism bias, basically, that their team will win more games than they actually will. And so to bet the over, so they have these over-under bets where you can bet on how many games will your team win in the following year. And there are 16 games in the season for every team, and then if they go on to the games that lead to the Super Bowl. But so they have these odds. It's like 9.5 or 10.5 games. And so if you bet the over, which most amateur bettors do, that's kind of like known as like the sucker's bet. You know what I mean? So he talks about how if you can get a really good number on the under, then do it, that sort of thing. So that's kind of the way that he approaches it.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so he's using a combination of things. In trading terms, he's considering his entry, but he's also considering how much he's likely to make out of it. So even if it's a good entry and the risk to reward's not favourable enough, he'll wait until it is.
Yeah, and he's always aware of risk to reward. Although, they mentioned that things like there are a lot of sucker bets out there where like, it's basically like 3 or 4 bets all rolled into one. And so, if all of these things happen, then you get paid out 200 to 1 or whatever. But they never happen. So it's never, you can make that bet 200 times and you're still probably less unlikely to hit it. So, all these sorts of things. So, and when news comes out, so news will come out that a star player isn't going to play or whatever, so that will affect the odds. And those are the sorts of points where he would swoop in and place his bets based on basically the market. There's a shock to the market essentially. Yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah.
And they sound like they're simple, obvious strategies, but the money management side of it is considered as well. And it's a really good example of how we should trade.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, and the whole thing, he was talking one time about how he used to have, because he lives in Las Vegas, and he used to have all of these guys who kind of like were working for him. They're like gophers or whatever, and they would go to all the casinos and they would wait because they were always waiting for the perfect time to place their bets, and so he'd be running around town placing these bets at all these different casinos, within like 15 minutes. And so he had to hire people that would help him to place these bets because they all had to be done like, within 20 minutes before the kickoff of the game or whatever, things like that. It's really, really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. You have to put the link up for that. I'd like to listen to it.
Yeah, I will. Yeah. He's an interesting guy. Yeah. And it's funny because like the guy that interviews him is he's a total meathead. He's a former player. And then, he'll just like, sometimes he just loses his cool and he's just like, no, man, that's not how it is. He's like, I play the numbers, you know what I mean? He's a very, he's very direct and sort of like, sometimes you can tell he's getting a little bit frustrated with the former player. Anyway, so when it comes to gambling, do you think, like drawing the parallels with trading, do you think that when it comes to gambling that I think gamblers can see this idea of running out of your stake by running into too many losers and consecutive losers. I think that's more obvious to gamblers than it is to traders, because I think traders overestimate their ability to find winners, and I think that's one of the dangers. I think it's like this hidden thing that traders don't consider, and I think it's simply because they feel like they won't trade a system that has a 35% win rate.
Yeah, I think, this is the point I was trying to make earlier. I think traders somehow see it as a distinctly different game to say, betting on horses. And to me, they're so similar. And I think that's where a lot of traders come unstuck, because they think it's a different game to the game that they're actually playing. I don't know, maybe it's just more appealing to think of it as a different game that you can somehow suss out. You can suss out how to get the winners. And I think when you're betting on horses, you kind of accept that the outcome is uncertain, even if it is a favourite. Whereas in trading, you kind of you'll have a setup that you see as being sure thing, and the expectation for it to win just seems to be a lot higher in trading. I don't know why that is. I think it's like you were saying, it kind of has this image of being more authoritarian and straight down the line, but I think that might be changing as well. I think gambling has kind of taken on a slightly different persona, and it's becoming but I remember when I was young, if someone said they were a professional gambler, you'd think they were a bit of a wide boy and a bit dodgy, and I think it's got a more sophisticated look about it now. And I think trading is probably going the other way as it becomes more and more popular, and there seems to be more sort of scams out there, and this kind of whole Instagram trader thing, that perhaps trading's taking on more of a negative image, a more reckless image.
Reckless, yeah. I just really want to see if you can post in the show notes an image of what a wide boy looks like. That's what I want to.
Is that not a term you have in the States?
No, but I've got to see it. I've got to see it now.
Okay.
All right, cool. So the other thing I just thought of, Darren, when you were saying that was, I think gamblers have an advantage, because if you're gambling on a game, like let's say you bet on the underdog and the underdog is winning the whole game, and at the end the favorite wins the game. So you were actually winning that bet for, let's say, of the 60 minutes of the game, you were winning the bet, and then in the last 2 or 3 minutes you lost. So you were actually winning the whole time, and then you lost. And I actually watched in the last Super Bowl last year, which was the Super Bowl that was in February of 2017. I watched this. There was this website that had the odds of each team winning, and these lines would go up and down as things would happen in the game, and because these teams in American football, they like employ statisticians to tell them whether, at key decisions in the game, the statistician will like call into the coach and tell him what to do based on the odds and whatever. But so they have these running thing, and it was amazing to see, because one team had like a 92% chance of winning, and then the odds completely crossed, and the other team actually ended up winning, and all these things had to fall into place for it to happen. So it was a very exciting game. But I think the gamblers, this is a long-winded way of saying, I think the gamblers have an advantage because they can't pull the plug on the bet. Once they put the bet down, it's like a binary option, right? It's like a binary option trade. Either it's going to hit the level or it's not. But traders have this distinct disadvantage of the tempting act of pulling your profits early. You know what I mean?
Yeah. We can mess with the bet once it's on, can't we?
Yeah, you've just completely changed the risk-reward ratio. And I think that's a big mistake. I think that happens all the time. And people will look at me like I'm crazy. Like, I had this trade on the pound yen, and it missed the take profit by just like, 3, 4, 5 pips, okay? And this was like, it was like 200 and, people, whatever pip, 260 pip profit or something like that. I don't know. And people look at me like I'm crazy. Like, say, how can you not take profit when it's that close to the take profit? And I'm like, well, if I do that, if I take, it came back up and stopped me out of break even, right? So I look at it. I've trained myself to look at that as a trade that never happened. But some people are going to look at it and they go, dude, are you kidding me? You had like 2R or 1.99R available to you on that trade, and you didn't take it. You're an idiot. The point of trading is to make money. But my point is, if I keep doing that, if I keep trading the last trade, and if I keep taking my profit too early, I'm not trading that system that I tested before. And so I can't do that. Like, I think that's a slippery slope that too many traders, it just ruins them by taking profit too early.
Their decisions are somehow better than the system, which begs the question, why have you even got a system in the first place?
Exactly.
And it's like the sayings, it's like the saying where nobody ever lost money by taking money off the table or something.
Yeah.
Is that a trading saying? Where's that come from?
Yeah.
It's just rubbish.
Yeah.
It's just rubbish,
Yeah, no one. You can't go broke by taking a profit. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's just it's obviously completely out of context, and there's so many of those out there. These trading idioms, and and then people just kind of like whitewash them to anything they're doing. And this guy might have been a trader for a bank that was trading in a particular way, and that little quote probably meant a lot to the way he's trading, but it just I find that people just kind of whitewash those over everything, and then they'll be all right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think that's the last thing I'm going to say on this. Like, for this episode, I think it's true that we have disadvantage as a trader because we don't have to stick to the risk reward ratio that we jump into at the beginning of our trade, whereas a gambler has to. They have no choice but to wait for the house to pay them out or not. And the trader can take profits early, and that's a dangerous thing.
Yeah. We can essentially break away from our system, but for a gambler, I suppose, in especially in horse racing, once you're in, then you're in, and it's much harder to mess with your system.
Yeah, traders can change the odds for the trade after the trade starts. And the gambler can't. Once the gambler puts his bet down, he can't he can't change the odds. The odds are locked in. But for the trader, you can completely change the odds of your bet. So of your trade after you're already in it, which is just madness when you think about it. But yeah,
the funny thing is, whenever I'm in Thailand and I talk to my Thai friends and they ask me what I do for a living and I explain it to them, they say, "Oh, you're a gambler." They all say it without fail, every single one of them. And then they kind of give me that kind of look like, "You sure you want to do that? You're a mug, you're going to lose your money." It's really funny.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's right. So you've basically been browbeaten into submission, and you've said, "Okay, yeah, I'm a gambler."
Yeah, I think gambling's got very negative connotations in Thailand, and it's illegal, but it's still, like many things that are illegal in Thailand, it still goes on. The Muay Thai fighting, especially, is it's all gambling.
Wow. Well, hey, Darren, thanks so much for the time, and I really appreciate the topic. That's something that people, hopefully, they've enjoyed over the last 2 episodes, because I really think it's something to think about, and it helps you to see trading in a different light, so I really appreciate it.
Okay, Walter. I will speak to you soon.
Bye.